"It's not a mistake! I'm yours!" Apache woman said to the rancher who's waiting for his bride. The morning air was cool and filled with the faint scent of dust and earth. James stood at the edge of the train platform, his boots tapping lightly against the wooden boards, a nervous rhythm he could not control. His hat shaded his eyes from the weak winter sun, but it did little to hide the tension in his face. For years he had worked tirelessly on his ranch, tending to cattle, mending fences, and ensuring that his land remained fruitful and well kept. He had learned to find solace in the routines of farm life, the predictable rhythm of chores, the creak of the barn doors, and the soft lowing of the cattle at dusk. Break. Yet, despite the familiarity of the work, there had always been an emptiness, a space in his life meant for someone to share the quiet victories, the struggles, and the small joys of everyday life. Today, that emptiness seemed closer to being filled. Brash. Today, he was waiting for his bride. The match had been arranged long ago, through family and mutual acquaintances, and it had been approved by all parties. The bride was supposed to arrive on the morning train, and James had been pacing ever since dawn, checking the tracks, glancing at the distant horizon, imagining her face. He pictured her smiling, stepping down from the train, her hair catching the sunlight, her hands gentle but strong enough to help with the chores when needed. He had imagined countless versions of her, each more perfect than the last, shaped by hope, longing, and the quiet dreams of a man who had spent too long alone. The station itself was small, a wooden building that looked older than anyone could remember. Its paint was chipped and faded, and the bell above the door had a soft, rusted ring. Around him, life continued in slow, ordinary ways. Travelers moved about with baskets and luggage, children ran along the platform's edge, and the station master called out the train's expected arrival time. But James felt as though he were in a world apart, the noise and motion around him fading into background static. His mind was entirely on the future that might arrive with her, the life that could begin the moment she stepped onto the platform. As the morning wore on, James's thoughts wandered. He remembered the letters that had been sent back and forth before the arrangements were finalized. They were polite, filled with conventional expressions of courtesy, but he had read between the lines, searching for glimpses of personality, warmth, and understanding. Each letter had been a small thread weaving together a connection that, until today, had existed only in words and imagination. He wondered if she would be the kind of person who laughed easily, who worked alongside him without complaint, who could endure the solitude of ranch life without losing her spirit. Time seemed to stretch endlessly. The distant sound of a train whistle brought a quickening of his pulse, and yet, as the minutes passed, he found himself doubting, wondering if something might go wrong. Perhaps she had missed the train, or the letters had been misleading. Or maybe the reality would fall short of the image he had created in his mind. His hand brushed against the worn leather of his hat, and he shook his head, forcing himself to focus. He reminded himself that he had faced many challenges in life. Storms that tore through the pastures, cattle lost to illness, fences destroyed by wind and wild animals, but none had prepared him for the uncertainty of the human heart. The platform creaked beneath the weight of his boots as he moved closer to the edge, eyes scanning every approaching figure. With each person who stepped off the train, his heart skipped a beat, only to settle in disappointment when she did not appear. A young mother with a baby passed by, her laughter ringing softly, and James smiled faintly, realizing that life went on regardless of his impatience. But even as he watched others reunite with loved ones, he felt a strange mixture of hope and fear. Hope that his future bride would arrive, fear that she might not be what he had imagined, or that the years of loneliness had made him expect too much. In the quiet moments, James thought about his ranch, about the long days spent tending to the land and animals. He thought about the routines that had shaped him, the early mornings that began before sunrise, the evenings filled with the sound of wind through the trees and the distant cry of a coyote. Life on the ranch had been simple, honest, and demanding, but it had also been lonely. He had often wondered what it would be like to share those moments with someone, to have a companion who understood the quiet beauty of the land, the satisfaction of hard work, and the peace found in a simple, steady life. As the sun climbed higher, warming the wooden boards beneath his feet, James noticed the subtle changes in the station's activity. More travelers arrived, and a few townsfolk had gathered to watch the train's approach. There was a sense of anticipation in the air, a shared expectation that something important was about to happen. James felt a strange kinship with these strangers, all of whom were waiting for their own arrivals, their own connections, their own beginnings. Yet, despite the crowd, he felt alone, as though only he truly understood the significance of the moment to come. He recalled conversations with his family about the importance of marriage, about the role it played in building a life, in maintaining traditions, and in providing stability. They had spoken of love as something that could grow over time, nurtured by respect, patience, and shared effort. James hoped that this would be true, that the bond he was about to form would be more than a social arrangement, that it would be a partnership founded on trust, care, and mutual understanding. Rest. He imagined sitting together by the fire after a long day of work, sharing stories, planning for the future, and facing challenges side by side. The train whistle blew again, closer this time, echoing across the plains. James straightened his posture, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness that made his stomach twist. He scanned the arriving passengers, his eyes searching for the familiar face he had imagined countless times. Paris. Each figure that disembarked was studied carefully, every detail noted, until he realized that none of them were her. His heart sank slightly, but he forced himself to remain patient. Perhaps she was further back in the train, or perhaps the conductor would announce her arrival soon.
While waiting, James found his thoughts drifting to the idea of love and fate.
He wondered if the world truly worked in such precise, predictable ways, or if life was more often shaped by chance, choice, and unexpected encounters. He thought about the stories he had heard of people meeting in unexpected ways, of connections forming in moments when least expected, and he realized that perhaps this day could hold surprises beyond his imagination. The thought both excited and unsettled him, for he had spent so long anticipating a very specific outcome that anything different seemed unimaginable. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of earth, grass, and distant smoke from a nearby farm. Breath. James took a deep breath, letting the smells of the plains fill him with a sense of calm. He reminded himself that patience was a virtue, that the waiting itself was part of the journey, and that perhaps the moments before a meeting held as much significance as the meeting itself. He watched the track stretching into the distance, wondering about the stories of people who had traveled these same rails, about the hopes, dreams, and surprises that had accompanied them. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. James's boots scuffed against the boards again, a nervous habit that had become more pronounced as the train drew closer. He adjusted his hat, wiped the sweat from his brow, and tried to steady his racing thoughts. The sun now shone more brightly, warming his shoulders and casting long shadows across the platform. He glanced at the station clock, noting the time with a mix of anxiety and anticipation. Every tick of the minute hand seemed to echo the pulse of his own heart, counting down to a moment that could change his life forever. Finally, the train began to slow, the wheels screeching softly against the rails. Breath. Smoke curled into the sky, and the rhythmic chugging grew louder with each passing second. James felt his breath catch, his pulse quicken. He straightened his posture, adjusted his coat, and focused all his attention on the figures emerging from the train cars. Each passenger who stepped down was a test of patience, a trial of expectation. He studied every detail, searching for the woman who would step into his life, who would share his home, his work, and his dreams.
And yet, even as the train slowed, James remained poised, knowing that life was unpredictable.
He reminded himself that the future was not written, that even a single unexpected moment could alter the course of everything he had imagined. He braced himself, ready to face whatever or whoever might come, with an open heart and a mind prepared for both surprise and discovery. As the train came to a complete stop, the crowd on the platform began to stir. Passengers stepped down carefully, some hurrying to meet loved ones, others taking their time to gather belongings and catch their bearings. James's heart pounded as he watched each figure descend from the cars. Each person seemed ordinary at first, but James's eyes were trained for one face, one presence that he had imagined countless times. Every arrival that was not her caused a flicker of disappointment, yet he held on to hope, reminding himself that patience was essential. Then he saw her, though she was not at all what he had pictured. A young woman walked down the platform with confidence, her steps measured and steady. She had dark hair pulled back neatly, her skin sun-kissed from time spent outdoors, and eyes that held both warmth and quiet strength. She did not resemble the delicate, timid woman he had imagined from letters or family descriptions. Yet there was something about her that drew his gaze and held it. There was a calm certainty in her movements, a poise that suggested she was not simply a traveler, but someone who knew exactly where she was meant to be. For a moment, James could only stare, unsure how to react. His mind raced through thoughts of propriety, expectations, and the carefully constructed image he had built over months of waiting. Yet as he watched her approach, he felt a strange sense of familiarity, as if he had known her all along, even if their paths had never crossed in such an official way. There was a quiet dignity in her presence that made him pause and reconsider everything he had assumed about the day, about marriage, and about the life he had imagined. The woman stopped a few steps away, her eyes meeting his directly. She smiled, a gentle curve of the lips, not forced or rehearsed, but natural and sincere. There was a recognition in her gaze, a silent understanding that spoke to something deeper than words.
James felt an unexpected warmth rise within him, a mixture of relief, curiosity, and admiration.
He had been prepared for polite words and measured introductions, yet here was someone who carried her own confidence and purpose, someone who had arrived not as a passive participant, but as a person fully aware of her own choices. Breath. "James?" she asked softly, her voice steady yet kind. It was the first time he heard her speak, and it carried a tone of certainty that made his heart skip. "Yes," he replied, finding his own voice after a long moment of hesitation. "You must be?"
"I'm a Hyoka," she said simply.
There was no hesitation, no awkwardness, only a calm acknowledgement of herself. The name itself seemed to carry a history, a story of its own, and James felt an immediate curiosity. Perhaps he had heard the name before, connected to the local Apache community, but he had never met anyone like her. She was not simply someone from the town or a distant family match. She seemed entirely her own person, with a presence that demanded recognition and respect. Ahioka's gaze held his, and for a moment the world around them seemed to fade. The bustling station, the other travelers, and even the distant whistle of the train became background noise. It was as if time slowed, allowing them to acknowledge one another fully before any words or explanations were necessary. James felt an unfamiliar calm settle over him, a quiet reassurance that perhaps this encounter, unexpected as it was, might hold significance beyond his understanding.
"I know this may be unusual," Ahioka continued, her tone gentle but firm.
"I was supposed to come later, but I wanted to meet you today. I wanted to make sure you know it's not a mistake." Brace. James blinked, unsure of what to say. The words were both surprising and comforting. He had spent so long anticipating a certain kind of meeting, a specific arrangement, that the reality before him challenged everything he had imagined. Yet there was a sincerity in her voice, a quiet authority that made it impossible to dismiss her words as frivolous or unimportant. She stepped closer, careful but unafraid, and James noticed the subtle details of her presence, the strength in her hands, the way her eyes seemed to understand both hardship and hope, and the quiet dignity in her posture. These were not the features of a woman simply following instructions or fulfilling a duty. She had chosen this moment, this encounter, and in doing so she had claimed a kind of authority over her own story that James found both impressive and inspiring. "I have known of your family for some time," she explained, "and I have observed you as well. I know the work you do on your land, the care you give to your cattle, and the way you treat others. I have come because I believe in what I see, not because anyone else told me to. I am here because I want to be." James's mind swirled with questions and thoughts. He had never imagined that someone would choose him in such a deliberate way. His life had been filled with routines and responsibilities, yet love and companionship had always seemed like distant dreams, dependent on chance or arrangement. Now, in the presence of Ahioka, he felt the ground shift beneath him, not in instability, but in the recognition that life could be far richer and more unexpected than he had ever imagined. The two of them stood quietly for a moment, letting the words settle between them. Around them, the world continued, yet their attention was solely on one another. James realized that the woman before him was not only bold in her actions, but also thoughtful and perceptive. She had observed, waited, and decided, and her presence carried both confidence and humility. He felt a mixture of admiration, curiosity, and a cautious hope that perhaps this encounter could lead to something meaningful. Ahioka smiled again, sensing his hesitation. "I know this may seem sudden," she said, "but I wanted to meet you first, before anything else. I wanted to ensure that you understand my intentions. I am here because I want to be part of your life, if you will allow it." Grasp. James felt a shift within himself, a stirring of emotion that was both surprising and natural. He realized that the image he had built of a bride, based on letters and expectations, could not compare to the reality of a woman who arrived with purpose and clarity. Ahioka was not merely a figure in a plan. She was a person, full of life, knowledge, and determination. Rounded for the first time, he began to imagine a future that was not prescribed, but chosen. A life that could be built together, grounded in understanding, respect, and shared effort. He took a cautious step forward, breaking the tension of silence. I didn't expect this," he admitted, his voice steady despite the swirl of emotions inside him. "But I am glad you came. I want to understand, to know more about you, if you'll let me." Ahioka's eyes softened, and she nodded.
"I would like that," she said. "I want us to know each other, to see if our lives can fit together, not just because of tradition or expectation, but because it feels right for both of us."
The station master called out, signaling the final departure of the train, and the small crowd began to disperse. James and Ahioka remained on the platform, undisturbed by the noise or movement around them. They began to walk slowly toward the edge of the town, talking quietly about their lives, their experiences, and the work that awaited on the ranch. Each step was measured, deliberate, and careful, as if the rhythm of their conversation mirrored the careful construction of a new chapter in both their lives. Brations found himself listening intently to Ahioka, fascinated by her knowledge of the land and the way she spoke of animals, weather, and survival. She shared stories of her childhood, of learning from her family, and of understanding the balance between work, nature, and community best. He realized that her skills and wisdom would be invaluable on the ranch, not just in practical terms, but in teaching him new ways to see the world, to approach problems, and to find solutions that were thoughtful and effective. As they walked, the sun climbed higher, casting a golden light over the plains. The warmth touched their faces, and the wind carried the scent of grass, soil, and distant wildflowers. James felt a sense of peace he had not known in years, a quiet confidence that perhaps this meeting, unexpected and unconventional as it was, might be the beginning of something extraordinary. He looked at Ahioka and saw not only a partner, but a person who could challenge him, teach him, and share in the triumphs and struggles of life on the ranch. By the time they reached the ranch, the connection between them had begun to grow, subtle but undeniable. Words had been exchanged, stories shared, and mutual respect established. James felt a mixture of relief and excitement, knowing that the future he had imagined might be reshaped in ways more meaningful than he had anticipated. He realized that sometimes life's most important moments arrive unannounced, and that the heart often recognizes its companion in ways the mind cannot predict.
Ahioka paused at the edge of the ranch, looking over the land with an appreciative eye.
Breaths. "This is a beautiful place," she said softly. "I can see why it means so much to you," James nodded, a smile forming on his lips. "It is my home," he said. "And now, perhaps, it can be yours as well if you choose." Ahioka turned to him, her eyes steady and sincere.
"I have chosen!"
she replied simply. And in that moment, James felt a quiet certainty take root in his heart. The waiting, the anticipation, and the uncertainty had all led to this encounter. It was not the day he had imagined, but it was far more real, far more meaningful. And as they stood together on the ranch, ready to face the days ahead, he knew that this meeting, unexpected, unconventional, and yet perfectly timed, was the beginning of a story that would be theirs alone. The first days after Ahioka's arrival passed in a mixture of quiet work and hesitant conversation. James found himself observing her closely, learning not only the practical ways she approached the ranch, but also the gentle strength she carried in everything she did. Her movements were purposeful yet graceful, every gesture carrying intention. She fed the animals, checked the fences, and even helped mend the small wooden gate that had long been creaking with every gust of wind. Watching her work, James felt an unfamiliar warmth in his chest, a sense of admiration that went beyond gratitude for her assistance. It was respect, yes, but also the beginnings of something more profound, something he had not anticipated. They ate together in the evenings, sitting at the long wooden table that had been in his family for generations. Meals were simple, bread, vegetables, and meat from the ranch, but in her presence, even the simplest fare felt comforting and special. Ahioka spoke of her life, sharing memories of her family, the land she grew up on, and the traditions that had shaped her. James listened, fascinated by the depth of her knowledge and the care with which she described her experiences. He realized that she had a way of seeing the world that was both practical and poetic, grounded in reality yet open to wonder. One evening, after a long day of tending cattle and mending fences, they sat on the porch as the sun dipped low in the sky, painted the horizon in shades of orange, pink, and purple, reflecting in the still waters of the small pond nearby.
James finally found the courage to speak, his voice quieter than usual. "Ahioka," he began, "I have to admit, I was not expecting you to be, well, like this."
You paused, unsure how to finish the sentence without seeming rude.
"I mean, I didn't know what to expect, and yet now that you're here, I can't imagine it any other way."
Ahioka smiled softly, sensing his hesitation. Breath.
"I understand," she said. "I am not what you imagined, and I do not expect you to be ready all at once."
"But I wanted you to know that I am here because I chose to be. Not because anyone arranged it, not because it was expected, but because I believe we can share something meaningful." James felt a stirring in his heart at her words, her certainty, her honesty, and the way she spoke without arrogance yet with confidence made him pause. He had spent so long imagining love as something fragile and distant, dependent on circumstance or tradition. But here was someone standing before him, offering a choice and a possibility that he had never considered before. A life shared freely, built on trust and understanding. For several moments neither spoke. The wind rustled through the tall grasses. The cattle lowed softly in the distance, and the only sound was the faint creak of the porch boards under their weight. James felt a new realization settling within him. Life, he had learned, could not always be predicted. Plans, letters, and expectations were one thing, but the heart often recognized its companion in ways that reason could not. Breaths. And now, in Ahioka's presence, he felt that recognition stirring. Finally, he asked the question that had been forming in his mind since her arrival. Why me? His voice was quiet, almost hesitant, but full of curiosity. Breath. Why choose me? Ahioka looked at him steadily, her dark eyes reflecting the fading light of the day.
Because I have watched, and I have seen who you are, she said.
Psst. I have seen the care you give to your land, the respect you show to others, and the patience you carry in your work. I have known you before this arrangement even existed, and I realized that I wanted to be part of your life. Not because of what is expected, but because it feels right. Because I see your heart, and I know that it is honest. James felt a rush of emotion, a mixture of surprise, relief, and a strange new hope. He had expected this meeting to be formal, polite, and constrained by expectations. He had imagined a life that was planned out in letters and conversations, each step measured and cautious. But Ahioka's presence, her words, and her honesty shattered all of those assumptions, replacing them with a possibility he had not dared to imagine. Over the next several days, they spent more time together, learning about each other in ways that went beyond conversation. James showed her the routines of ranch life, how to care for the cattle, mend fences, and manage the fields. Ahioka responded with keen attention and a natural aptitude for the work. But she also shared her own knowledge, her understanding of the land, the seasons, and the patterns of nature that James had never fully considered. She taught him to notice the subtle signs in the wind, the soil, and the animals that indicated changes before they became obvious. In doing so, she did not criticize him, but offered guidance and insight with gentle patience. One afternoon, as they walked together along the edge of the property, James spoke about his fears.
I have been alone for so long, he said, that I am afraid I will not know how to live with someone else.
I am used to making all the decisions myself, relying only on myself. And now I feel as if my world is changing too quickly. Ahioka listened carefully, nodding. Change can be frightening, she said, but it is also necessary for growth. You have built a life for yourself, and it is strong and steady. I am not here to change you, but to walk alongside you. We can learn from one another, support one another, and build something together that is stronger than either of us alone. Her words struck him deeply, but he realized that he had been carrying not just the loneliness of years, but also the fear of failure. The worry that life shared with another person could be complicated or disappointing. But Ahioka's presence did not bring fear. It brought possibility. It was not a replacement for what he had known, but an addition, an expansion of life that could bring new depth, warmth, and purpose. One evening, after a particularly long day repairing a fence that had been damaged in a storm, James sat with Ahioka near the small fire pit at the edge of the ranch. The sky was deepening into shades of navy and indigo, and the first stars were beginning to appear. The quiet of the night seemed to wrap around them, creating a space where words were not always necessary.
Ahioka broke the silence, speaking softly.
Perhaps. James, I want you to know that I am not here because of obligation or expectation. I am here because I believe in us. I believe that we can share a life that is honest, full of care, and built on understanding. I want to be part of your world, but only if you are willing to let me in. James felt a warmth spread through him, a sense of acceptance that he had not known in years. The intensity of her sincerity, combined with the quiet strength she displayed, made him realize that he could trust her, for he could allow himself to be vulnerable. to share his thoughts, hopes, and fears without fear of judgment or rejection. For the first time in a long time, he felt truly seen. I want that too, he said finally, his voice steady. I want to learn from you, to share my life with you, and to see where this can go. I cannot promise I will always have the right words or actions, but I can promise that I will try, with honesty, respect, and care. Ayoka smiled, her eyes reflecting the light of the fire and the stars above. Breaths, she said. We will grow together, not perfectly, but with understanding and patience. That is how a life worth sharing is built. In the weeks that followed, James and Ahioka began to settle into a rhythm, working side by side on the ranch and learning to navigate the complexities of trust, respect, and affection. They laughed at small mistakes, celebrated small successes, and supported each other when the work became difficult or the weather harsh. Slowly, a bond formed that was deeper than friendship, yet not yet fully love. A connection built on shared experience, mutual respect, and the knowledge that they had chosen one another freely. James realized that this connection was unlike anything he had imagined in his solitary life. It was not the orderly, predictable future he had once envisioned, but something richer and more real. Ahioka's choice to be with him, her honesty and insight, and her unwavering presence taught him that love was not merely a matter of convenience or arrangement. It was built through understanding, patience, and shared effort. And so, on quiet evenings when the work was done and the ranch lay peaceful under the fading light, James and Ahioka would sit together, sharing stories, dreams, and reflections. They began to understand not only each other's strengths but also each other's vulnerabilities, learning to navigate the spaces between expectation and reality, fear and hope, solitude and companionship. In these moments, James realized that life had brought him something extraordinary, not because it had gone according to plan, but because it had taken a path that allowed him to truly see, know, and connect with another human being. The days that followed were filled with a rhythm that was both comforting and new. James and Ahioka had begun to work together seamlessly, sharing the responsibilities of the ranch in ways that neither of them had expected. The early mornings brought the soft light of dawn over the rolling fields, and they would rise together, the quiet hum of the world around them accompanying the start of their day. They fed the cattle, mended fences, and inspected the crops, their movements in harmony as though they had been working together for far longer than just a few weeks. There was a gentle satisfaction in this shared labor, a sense that life could be both challenging and rewarding when faced with companionship.
Ahioka had a way of noticing details that James often overlooked.
She would point out when the soil felt too dry in one patch, when a fence post was loose, or when a cow seemed unusually quiet. Her knowledge of the land was not just practical, it was intuitive, informed by years of understanding the rhythms of nature and the ways of animals. James found himself learning from her every day, amazed at how much she could teach him about life on the ranch. And yet, she did not impose her methods. Instead, she guided him gently, offering suggestions and sharing insights that expanded his perspective. One afternoon, after a morning of repairing a damaged section of fence, James and Ahioka took a break under the shade of a large oak tree at the edge of the pasture. The air was warm and a soft breeze carried the scent of grass, earth, and distant wildflowers. They sat quietly for a while, watching the cattle graze and listening to the hum of nature around them. It was a rare moment of stillness, a pause in the constant motion of the ranch, and both of them appreciated it. Ahioka spoke first, her voice soft but thoughtful. James, I have always believed that understanding comes from observation, she said. You cannot know everything from words alone. You must watch, listen, and feel. That is how life teaches us. James nodded, impressed by her wisdom.
I see that now, he said. I have spent so long relying only on what I thought I knew, on routines and habits. But you have shown me there is more to see, more to learn if I take the time to notice.
They shared a smile, the quiet connection between them growing stronger with every conversation, every shared task, and every moment of trust. It was not the dramatic, passionate love of stories, but something steadier and more enduring. A partnership built on respect, understanding, and the slow unfolding of affection. As the weeks passed, James began to notice other qualities in Ahioka that he had not expected. She was patient, even when work was difficult or weather turned harsh. She was thoughtful, always considering the needs of the land, the animals, and those around her. And she was courageous, unafraid to face challenges that might have daunted others. Her presence brought a sense of balance to the ranch, and James found himself relying on her not only for practical matters, but also for companionship and guidance. One day, a sudden storm rolled in from the west, dark clouds gathering quickly over the horizon. The wind picked up, carrying the first drops of rain, and James realized they had little time to secure the animals and protect the property. He called to Ahioka, and together they moved swiftly, closing gates, bringing the cattle closer to shelter, and tying down loose equipment. The work was exhausting, but they moved with efficiency and cooperation, each anticipating the other's actions without the need for words. As the storm raged around them, James found himself marveling at her calm determination. While he had often faced storms alone, relying on his own strength and experience, Ahioka's presence added a sense of security and confidence that he had never known. Together they managed the ranch through the chaos of wind and rain, emerging at the other end tired but unbroken. That evening, as they sat by the fire drying their clothes and sipping warm tea, James felt a deep sense of gratitude and admiration for her. "You handled that so well," he said quietly, his eyes reflecting both relief and respect. "I don't think I could have done it alone."
Ahioka smiled, a quiet satisfaction in her expression.
"We did it together," she said.
Life is easier when shared, James. Strength is multiplied when it is combined with care and understanding.
These words stayed with him, echoing in his mind as the days passed. He realized that the bond between them was growing stronger not because of grand gestures or declarations, but because of the steady, shared experiences that built trust and connection. Every day brought new lessons, new challenges, and new opportunities to deepen their understanding of one another.
In addition to the work on the ranch, they began to share moments of leisure, simple joys that strengthened their connection.
They walked together along the edge of the fields at sunset, watching the sky turn brilliant shades of orange and pink. They shared quiet meals on the porch, laughing at small mistakes or reminiscing about childhood memories. Bert. They spoke of dreams for the future, of hopes for the ranch, and of the life they wanted to build together. Bert. Each conversation, each shared experience brought them closer, creating a foundation of trust and affection that could withstand the uncertainties of life. James began to notice the small ways in which Ahioka had already changed his perspective. He saw the land through her eyes, appreciating the subtle signs of nature and the delicate balance of life on the ranch. He listened more carefully to the animals, noticing their behavior and moods in ways he had not before. He began to understand that her presence was not just a comfort, but a source of knowledge, insight, and guidance that enriched every aspect of his life. One evening, as they sat together by the fire, Ahioka spoke of her own reflections. "I have always believed that life is a series of lessons," she said. "Some are learned through hardship, some through joy, and some through the people we meet." "You have taught me patience and resilience, James, and I hope I have shown you that understanding and care can change how we see the world."
James reached out, taking her hand in his.
"You have taught me more than I ever imagined," he said. "Not just about the land or the ranch, but about life itself. I see now that work, effort, and care are not just tasks. They are ways of connecting, of understanding, and of building something lasting. And I am grateful to share this with you." The bond between them continued to grow, strengthened by shared experiences and mutual respect. They faced difficulties together, from unpredictable weather to the challenges of managing the ranch, and each obstacle became an opportunity to support and learn from one another. The trust between them deepened, and with it, a quiet affection began to emerge, a sense of companionship that promised a lifetime of shared moments, both challenging and joyful.
Over time, the community around the ranch began to notice the partnership forming between James and Ahioka.
Neighbors observed the way they worked together, the way they respected and supported one another, and the quiet joy that seemed to radiate from their shared presence. While some were initially surprised by the unconventional nature of their bond, the sincerity of their connection became evident to all who watched. Their relationship was not dictated by expectation or tradition, but by choice, understanding, and mutual admiration. By one afternoon, as they walked along the creek that ran through the property, James spoke of his thoughts about the future.
"I never imagined life could feel like this," he said.
"I always thought it would be lonely, filled only with work and responsibility. But now with you, I see that life can be shared, that every challenge and every joy is richer when experienced together." Yoka smiled, her eyes reflecting the sunlight glinting off the water. "That is how life should be," she said. "We are stronger together, not because we are the same, but because we complement each other. Your strength, your patience, your care, combined with my knowledge, perspective, and heart, we can build a life that is steady, meaningful, and full of understanding." As the seasons changed, so too did their bond. The routine of work, the rhythm of the ranch, and the shared experiences created a deep connection, one that neither of them could have anticipated when they first met. James realized that love was not always a sudden, dramatic event. It could grow quietly, steadily, and with intention, rooted in respect, trust, and the willingness to face life together. By the end of the season, James and Ayuka had not only strengthened the ranch but also built a foundation for their future. They had learned to rely on one another, to celebrate each success, and to face each challenge with patience and care. Their partnership had become a source of strength, comfort, and joy, a testament to the power of trust, understanding, and shared effort. And as they stood together one evening, watching the sun set over the fields they had nurtured and protected, James felt a sense of certainty he had never known before. Life had brought them together in unexpected ways, through choice and intention rather than mere circumstance. And in that realization, he knew that their bond, built on trust, respect, and growing affection, would guide them through whatever challenges and joys lay ahead. The weeks turned into months, and with each passing day, the bond between James and Ahioka grew stronger. What had begun as cautious understanding had transformed into a deep partnership, rooted in trust, respect, and mutual care. The ranch, once a place of solitary labor, now thrived with the presence of two people working together, not just side by side, but in harmony. Every fence mended, every animal cared for, every harvest tended was a testament to the life they were building together, a life chosen deliberately, full of purpose and quiet joy. Neighbors began to notice the changes, both in the ranch and in the people themselves. James was no longer the solitary man who had paced the train station months ago. His shoulders carried not only the weight of responsibility but also a calm confidence that came from having a companion. Ahioka, too, became a familiar figure in the community. Her knowledge of the land, her calm manner, and her willingness to help others quietly earned her respect and admiration. Those who had doubted the unconventional nature of their partnership began to see the strength in the bond they shared. It was not a relationship of spectacle, but of substance, a partnership built on mutual recognition and choice. One sunny afternoon, as James and Achioka walked along the fence line inspecting the cattle, they paused to watch the horizon. The sky was a brilliant blue, dotted with wispy clouds, and the gentle hum of the ranch filled the air. James felt a deep sense of contentment, a feeling that life had brought him to a place he had not dared to hope for when he first waited at the train station.
He turned to Ahioka, seeing the warmth of the sun illuminate her face, and felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude.
I cannot believe how far we have come, he said softly, his voice carrying both awe and sincerity. When I first waited at the station, I had an image of what the future would be, but it could never have been like this. Not like you, not like us. Ahioka smiled, her eyes reflecting the calm certainty she had carried since the first day they met. Life has a way of surprising us, she replied. Sometimes the future we imagine is only a shadow of what could be. We cannot plan everything, but we can choose the moments and people that shape our lives. And I chose this, us, because it feels right. They continued their walk, their steps synchronized in an unspoken rhythm, each finding comfort and joy in the presence of the other. Over the months they had faced small storms and large ones, unpredictable weather, stubborn animals, and the daily demands of managing the land. But each challenge had only strengthened their partnership. They had learned to communicate without words, to anticipate each other's needs, and to support one another without expectation or complaint.
It was a relationship built not on convenience or obligation, but on mutual recognition and deliberate choice.
As the sun began to lower toward the horizon, casting golden light across the fields, James and Ahioka paused by the small pond at the edge of the property. The water reflected the sky above, calm and still, and the soft chirping of crickets filled the air. It was in moments like this that James realized the depth of his affection for Ahioka. Not in grand declarations, but in quiet presence, shared labor, and mutual understanding. None of them. Ahioka, he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. I want you to know that you have changed my life, not just because of your presence, but because of who you are. You have taught me patience, understanding, and the value of seeing the world differently. I am grateful for every moment we have shared, and I hope we can continue to build this life together, always learning and growing. Ahioka reached out, taking his hand in hers, her grip firm but gentle. James, she said softly, I feel the same. Strength and the ability to trust another person completely. I am here because I want to be, not because it is expected or convenient, but because it feels right for both of us.
Our life together is not a mistake. It is a choice we have made, and I am proud of that choice every single day. The words hung in the air between them, simple yet profound.
James felt a sense of clarity he had never experienced before. Love, he realized, was not always about passion or immediate connection. Sometimes it was about shared effort, understanding, and the quiet building of a life together. Ahioka had not only entered his world, but she had also expanded it, enriching it in ways he could not have anticipated. And in that moment he knew that their life together would be strong, steady, and full of meaning. As evening fell, the two returned to the ranch house where the warm light from the window spilled onto the porch. They shared a simple meal, speaking softly about the day's work, their plans for the next week, and the small improvements they wanted to make to the ranch. Their conversation flowed naturally, comfortable in its rhythm, a testament to the partnership that had grown between them. There was laughter, shared stories, and the occasional thoughtful pause, each element contributing to the sense of home that had taken root in the ranch. In the weeks that followed, the community grew accustomed to seeing them together, working, walking, and sharing moments of quiet reflection. People began to understand that their relationship was not a matter of social expectation, but of deliberate choice and mutual respect. But even those who had initially questioned Ahioka's presence on the ranch came to admire her skills, her wisdom, and the way she complemented James's work. The couple became an example of partnership, showing that love and respect could create a life that was not only functional but deeply meaningful. One day, as they stood together on a hill overlooking the fields, James reflected on the journey that had brought them here. He remembered the long hours waiting at the train station, the uncertainty, the anticipation. and the unexpected encounter that had changed everything. Brett. He realized that life often had a way of presenting opportunities in ways that could not be foreseen, and that the courage to accept the unexpected was sometimes the key to true happiness.
I never thought my life could be like this, he said, his voice soft against the wind.
Not because of the work or the ranch, but because of you. You have brought something into my life that I didn't even know was missing.
Ahioka placed her hand over his, her eyes calm and unwavering.
And you have done the same for me, she said.
Life is not about waiting for the perfect moment or the perfect person. It is about recognizing what is real, what is meaningful, and choosing it.
I chose this, and I will continue to choose it every day!
The two stood together in silence for a long moment, taking in the vast landscape around them. The fields stretched toward the horizon, dotted with grazing cattle, and the soft outlines of trees swaying in the wind. The ranch, once a solitary man's domain, had become a home filled with life, purpose, and shared responsibility. It was a place where their partnership could thrive, where they could face challenges together, and where the love they had nurtured could grow steadily over time. As the seasons continued to change, James and Ahioka built traditions of their own. They celebrated small victories on the ranch, marked the passing of the seasons with quiet reflection, and learned to anticipate each other's needs without speaking. They found joy in the simplicity of shared work, the satisfaction of tending to the land, and the comfort of knowing that, at the end of each day, they would face the world together. Each day strengthened their bond, reinforcing the idea that love was not just an emotion, but a series of choices, actions, and commitments that shaped a life shared with care. The townsfolk, once curious or skeptical, began to see the couple as an example of what partnership could truly mean. Their story was not one of instant passion or dramatic declarations, but of steady commitment, shared understanding, and deliberate choice. Neighbors admired the way they worked together, how they supported one another, and how they approached life with respect, patience, and integrity.
In a world often dominated by expectation and tradition, James and Ahioka had chosen a path defined by mutual understanding, and in doing so, they had created something rare and enduring.
One crisp morning, as the sun rose over the horizon, casting long shadows across the fields, James and Ahioka stood together on the porch, watching the cattle graze. The air was filled with the gentle sounds of life, the rustling of leaves, the lowing of the cows, and the distant call of birds welcoming the day. James felt a profound sense of peace, a knowledge that life had brought him exactly where he needed to be. He turned to Ahioka, seeing in her eyes the same quiet certainty and contentment he felt within himself. "I am glad you are here," he said softly. "I am glad too," she replied simply. "Not because it was expected, but because it is right. We have chosen this life together, and it is ours." And in that simple acknowledgement, James realized the full meaning of their journey. The waiting, the uncertainty, the unexpected encounter. All had led to this moment. A life chosen together, not dictated by circumstance, expectation, or obligation, but by the deliberate, heartfelt choice to walk side by side. It was a life filled with trust, respect, understanding, and quiet love. A life that would continue to grow and flourish with each passing day. As the sun climbed higher, warming the fields and the porch beneath them, James and Ahioka looked out over the land they had nurtured and protected together. Their journey had not been simple or predictable, but it had been theirs. And as they stood there, hand in hand, they knew that whatever challenges or joys lay ahead, they would face them together, building a life defined not by mistakes or expectations, but by the deliberate choice to love, support, and grow with one another.